For the final lesson of our evolution unit, I wanted to take a minute and review the levels of biological organization and make sure we were all familiar with the components of ecosystems and biomes that we will need to examine or create our organisms. So remember that biological organization flows from the least complex, which is a single organism, to the most complex, which is the biosphere. So the biosphere being the entire Earth. An individual organism would be you or me or an animal, for example, a bear or a fish or a beetle. And that's the individual one unit of that species. When we look at this example, we see Nemo the clownfish. Okay, one clownfish, that is an organism, and this is the lowest level. Evolution is not going to occur at a single level with one organism. Within a population, which is a group of organisms within the same species, this is where we would begin to talk about fitness and the passing along of traits from one organism to the next. We know that in order for something to be considered fit, it needs to be able to pass on its trait from itself to its offspring and continue passing that trait through the generations. So in order to be fit, it must be able to breed with members of the same species, and that would make it a population. We know that organisms interact within a community. This would include, in the aquatic example we're using here, things like the anemone, the clownfish. We can think about the adaptation that a clownfish might have. For example, a clownfish lives in an anemone, and the benefit to the clownfish is that the anemone provides protection for the clownfish. So when we think about fitness in the environment that the clownfish lives in, part of it being fit or being naturally selected for that environment is that it's immune to the harmful effect of the anemone. It doesn't get stung by the anemone. Because it doesn't get stung by the anemone, the clownfish is the most fit for that environment. When we look at ecosystems, now we're looking at living and non-living things. And when you begin to think about your organism and creating your organism and different characteristics or traits that your organism would have that would allow your organism to survive or be the most fit in that ecosystem or that biosphere, it's really important that we take into account the biotic, living, and the abiotic, non-living factors that our organism would interact with. For example, clownfish are fit in aquatic environments. They are not going to be able to survive in a terrestrial land environment, such as on the shore or in the desert, because they would not be fit for that environment. Similarly, a lion, for example, would not be fit to live in the ocean. We can even see this with different aquatic species. We know that some species can only live in saltwater and some can only live in freshwater. And those are taking into account the biotic and abiotic factors that go into producing fitness or selecting for fitness, this idea of natural selection. Organisms are fit or selected for the environment. When you move forward in creating your creature and thinking about the biosphere and the ecosystem that your creature would live in, it's important that you consider not only those biotic factors, but also the abiotic factors that play into that. So we can talk about biomes, and that's really what we're focused on here, is looking at the different biomes. Remember, biomes share the same climate and have similar types of living organisms. So they're not going to be all the same, but there is this idea that within a biome, because they have similar temperatures and rainfalls, the organisms would be able to live within those biomes. For example, an organism that can live in one part of the tundra is more suited to live in another part of the tundra versus in a tropical rainforest. If you take that organism from the tundra and you move it into the tropical rainforest, its fitness will dramatically decline. It won't be able to survive in that. We can think about a polar bear versus, this isn't tropical rainforest, but versus like a panda bear. They obviously are both bears, but they're not of the same species. They can't interbreed, and they don't have the same fitness in the specific environments. So as you move forward with this project, make sure you pay special attention to the biotic and abiotic factors that your organism is going to interact with. The clownfish, for example, one abiotic factor would be the salt water. It needs to live in salt water. One biotic factor that it interacts with is the amoeba. It has a special mucus coating that enables it to swim into the amoeba and not be stung and not be hurt by that. So think about your biome. Think about what abiotic factors such as temperature and water and climate would impact your organism and what adaptations it might need to survive well in that. If you have a desert area, that's the biome that you choose. Your organism should be one that doesn't require a lot of water, one that can survive well. If we think about a cactus, for example, it can absorb water when it gets it, and it holds it for a very, very long time. We think about the vacuoles, the central vacuoles for storage that we see in plants. Those are going to be different in a cactus than they are a palm tree, for example, because those would be exposed to a lot of water, and so it's not going to benefit from holding that much water. So again, think about the biotic and abiotic factors that your organism is going to interact with. That will help you kind of focus on your 10 to 15 traits that you'll need for your final project. Think about efficiency and how your organism would use energy or how it would exert energy to survive, to be the fittest. Remember, organisms never want to waste energy, so if it's something they don't need to do, they're not going to do it. And then make sure you really think about those ideas of natural selection that we talked about, not only the traits, but things like camouflage and mimicry, and what features your organism might be able to use to make them more adaptable or more fit in the various biome that you choose. Remember, you'll need 10 to 15 for the final, so be really careful in picking your biome. Make sure you pick one that you're familiar enough with. You'll want to do a little additional research to find out some of the greater details that you might be a little unclear on. I have pasted right under this video a link to a website from the University of California, Berkeley, that will help you kind of look at and explore the biomes further for your review. And always let me know if you have any questions.